So I think in an ideal world, I would love to see more collaborations between the art and science community in general. I know we as a society kind of view the two as polar opposites, but it would be really great to see things like scientists working alongside with artists to produce larger projects that would invoke more interest from the public into learning more important information that scientists would want them to know or want them to be aware of. And I feel like if they could do that through a unique medium such as art, people would certainly be more interested and more engaged in information that they're trying to put out to the world.
Greetings, fellow explorers, and welcome to the 17th episode of Geekoscopy 101, the podcast that explores the nexus between science, story, wonder, and philosophy with me, your host, Dr. Yanis Kiston. And today I had a chat with an artist who delves into a bit of marine science and environmentalism with her art. And it was quite an interesting chat, and I hope that more of this will come about. But without further ado, let's get into the depths of science art with Kir of Umvvelt. All right, welcome to the show, Kir. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat to you. You were the first science artist, or is it SciArtist? I know there is a hashtag SciArt all over Instagram and Twitter, but do you call yourself a SciArtist? What do you refer to yourself as?
I'm not too sure. I guess since I do fall into the category of both, I would refer to myself as a sci artist. But because I'm so focused on art, sometimes I'm not sure if I'm like one or the other, you know?
For sure. So what do you do in general? Like, who are you in this moment? What are you doing in this space?
So sure thing. My name is Carolyn, but I'm more commonly known as my online alias, which is Kir. I run a small business called Umvvelt, which I started January of 2020. And and my mission through Umvvelt is to inspire a sense of compassion and respect for the ocean and its inhabitants through a combination of education, fundraising, and art. So I design and draw all of my own products, which I then sell through an online store. And my goal is to have people engage and enjoy my products enough to learn the reason behind why I choose specifically to focus on marine-themed art for my work. And that all goes back into raising awareness and educating people about what's going on with our oceans today and why it's so important to advocate for conservation across all sorts of marine life.
And what sparked the idea of using marine science or marine biology as a focus for your art and e-commerce?
To be honest, I've always just had a really strong passion for marine biology. That stemmed all the way back from when I was a kid, just growing up. My mom purchased old cassette tapes of, Blue Planet that I'd watch and just rewatch growing up. And then in high school, I ended up becoming a volunteer in education interpretation at my local aquarium for about 2 years before graduating high school and attending university. So the easiest way to say it is I just really like fish and I find the ocean fascinating. So I just want to share that out with the world because I know there's this stigma like the ocean is a really big and scary place and there's things you should be afraid of. But I think it's just we as humans are afraid of the things that we don't know. So the more we learn about it, I feel that fear can be quelled through knowledge.
For sure. I mean, knowledge is I think, a part of the human experience in terms of we always strive to try and know more things, but each, I think, human being tries to know different things. But that's kind of the problem when it comes to the environment, because we, I think, as a general species, are not really aware of the impacts that we are having, not really aware about how life functions in general. And sometimes decisions are made that are not in line with, protecting the environment or even doing things in a sustainable way that we can continue doing in the future without just everything blowing up. So I'm really happy that you're doing something in the space. So how do you exactly mesh all of that into your art? How do you go about deciding how to design these things and what to say?
So at the moment, I have like two different methods where I try to work with. It depends on the kind of message that I want to convey to my audience in particular. So the two focuses I work with are in education and in conservation. So one of them, which is run through my Patreon, focuses on primarily on education. And that kind of works as a fun monthly subscription club deal. So supporters will receive different sorts of items monthly, depending on a tier that they sign up for. And most of the rewards just feature different animals to learn about each month. And all in all, it's just a more fun and interactive way of getting to learn new things about different animals each month. It's done on a much more consistent schedule because it's done monthly versus conservation projects, which are done a little less frequently. And then the latter, which is conservation projects, are usually decided through current events. So there are larger scale projects that happen when I tend to hear about news in the scientific community that I feel is really crucial to share and spread with the public. Conservation projects also focus more on fundraising and raising awareness. So usually 100% of the profits for whatever item I choose to design for that project is donated towards organizations that are committed to helping the cause that I'm trying to advocate for, whether that's through additional research or additional funding for conservation efforts.
Okay, so it's a mixture of crowdfunding, engagement, and e-commerce, I suspect. That sounds actually like a lot. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by all the stuff that you do?
Definitely. So that's some of the challenges that I definitely deal with in this business. Just aside, the process of just starting a business is already a huge risk up front because we're talking about financial investments. We're talking about research into marketing, which I didn't know the first thing about, obviously, because I was a marine bio student, not a student for financial information or business or marketing. And you're right. In addition to that, I am currently the only person that works and runs Umvvelt, meaning I do literally every single aspect of my job that a larger business would usually have multiple people employed to take care of. So outside of Patreon and outside of those conservation projects, I also run my online store. And that's something that I have to pack and ship from my own home. That's something I have to design on like a spare time, dealing with customer service and stuff like that. That's all the things I have to deal with too.
So what are some of the other challenges you've faced on this journey?
So that's certainly one of them. The problem of just trying to run an entire business by myself is a huge challenge I currently face, because I think especially with the COVID virus going on right now, it's very difficult to find additional help, especially because I work from home, And in addition to that, I think balancing art and research and trying to convey scientific knowledge in a way that's easily digestible to the average person, without them thinking that, it's too boring or it's like too much information for them to actually process through their heads. Because, a lot of people nowadays, because of, their engagement in social media, we see things like TikTok videos and things like that that are really shortened because it keeps people's really short, their attention spans, right? So my goal is to try to condense all this information that, I think the science community, because, where we went to university, we're accustomed to big fancy words that people who didn't study science don't quite understand. So balancing that art and then combining that into something that's easily digestible for people to understand is another challenge that I have to deal with. Because ultimately the goal is to attract people through visual art and have them drawn in and want to know more about it. And getting them to understand the message without confusing them is just like a key factor that I try to keep in mind. And just figuring out that balance is a huge part of my job. So drawing something that's attractive to people, but having it carry vital information that's easy to understand. And that's something that I'm still learning how to do. Because I just started Umvvelt last year, I'm hoping that as Umvvelt grows more and more in the future, that my work will gradually improve along with it as I learn more and more through experience.
For sure. It's still early days for a company, 1 year.
Right.
So when somebody subscribes to your Patreon, like how do they engage? What do they do? What do they get exactly?
My public shop is just reserved for things that I release out to the public. And then part of subscribing to my Patreon is you have that exclusive access, right? So aside just, for example, giving them early access to my shop and things like that, I run, like I mentioned before, it works as a kind of monthly subscription box. So every month I try to design something new that I don't release to the public. It is exclusive just for Patreon. And it tends to be like infographic cards, so postcards that people can enjoy that have additional information on the backside where they can learn about the specific animal that I choose to focus on that month. There's like enamel pins that have like fun fact backing cards with them. So there's like little miniature facts that they can read that go along with like a pretty item that they might really like. So part of that was just trying to incorporate, because people, especially nowadays, like they're very materialistic. Because, obviously online shopping has gotten popular, and shopping has always been popular in general, right? We love purchasing things and we love like showing them off. We love wearing them, or whatever reason we decide to purchase items. That it just kind of satisfies that little dragon hoarder. That little dragon that lives in our heads that wants to hoard everything, right? Everything that's shiny, everything that's like nice and expensive or really pretty and attractive to the eye. We just want to hoard it, right? So I kind of figured, like, if I can get people, if I can trigger that part of people where I want this, but because, we already know it's there. People constantly there's a constant demand for unique products and a constant demand for stuff that's pretty or things that people will enjoy. So trying to trigger that, and then in the process kind of like, slide them some information like, hey, you already purchased this. Here's some cool information that you can learn about in exchange because you've already purchased this item. That's something that I've been trying to work with. So in the artist community, things like postcards or stickers, that's something that people are really fond of. So I try to incorporate stuff like that that's a little easier to produce because I do a lot of research for these postcards. So working on one postcard can take me anywhere from about 6 to 12 hours to do. And then I have to get these products ready a month ahead before so I can ship them out properly to people when that month actually comes around. So I try, like, a lot of it goes into research with producing items that are easier to produce and don't have too long of a turnaround time. And then figuring out if it's an item that people do want. So if it's like postcards or stickers or a pin that they can wear or anything like that, that also ties along into how Patreon works. And I think that's pretty much it. Because it's exclusive, people are more enticed to join because only patrons will get access to all these rewards. And because the rewards change up monthly, it's really difficult to like, I want this thing, and then I can always go back and get it later. It's always like, well, we're always moving on. We're always learning about new things every single month. So it's always good just to come join us and just learn about something new every single month that you might not have known before.
For sure, and I mean, I would suspect that the Patreon community would be more engaged with your content than a average follower.
Right. It's definitely a group of people who choose to invest and commit to me personally, just because, whether it's because they like my art or they like the reason why I'm working, the reason why I chose to start Umvvelt in the first place and things like that. So it is really neat to have such a unique community that really supports what I do, just personally.
Yeah, for sure. I would also suspect it might be a good place to gather data and information onto what you might then use in the store.
Definitely.
So, I mean, you've only been around for like 13, 14 months, right? Well, the store, not you personally, but the store.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether like you might have any inkling, but like how do you think the landscape changed, like from when you started, and things started changing with COVID, and now things are now changing, and now we have a vaccine rollout? Like, how has engagement changed over that time? How has business changed over that time? Have you seen any trends?
So definitely when COVID hit and we did see a lot of those in-person access places did shut off. A lot of people did start turning to online and e-commerce, which was really helpful in me growing my business, especially because I am entirely an e-commerce run business. Before COVID happened, I ran like a smaller shop in university, and that's actually where I had some experience prior to deciding to run this, now much larger business. I didn't actually plan to start Umvvelt. It kind of sort of happened when I was stuck at a crossroads, because the little shop that I had before didn't really focus too much into like the science aspect. It was kind of more, like popular anime shows and fandom things, and that was really neat because you connect with a different sort of community, and you make different relationships that you would in a scientific community. So that sort of relationship with art is really what kind of put me at a crossroads. When I was close to finishing up university, I was kind of deciding, art became really important to me because marine biology has always been a passion for me. But as I started to get more and more involved in the art community over the past few years, when I started drawing more and being more active in university, I had to kind of come to like a choice, because it's really difficult. Like, you don't see too many opportunities where you can work in art and in science and have like a good balance of both. It's like science tends to stick with science and art tends to stick with art. So I just kind of brainstormed from there, and I was like, well, I already have I have experience from starting this online shop, and I kind of know how it works, like behind the scenes, like the process of designing your products, learning a little bit about marketing, especially through social media, because everybody uses social media nowadays. How that plays in like a key factor into advertising, and just stuff like that in general. So from there, I was just like, well, why don't I put two and two together? I really do like marine biology. I had experience from I had my volunteer experience from high school, where I primarily did a lot of education. And that was something I found out that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed sharing knowledge with people. I enjoyed, condensing this information in a way that it was easy for people to understand. And I was thinking, if I can put those two together, if I can make products that can either spin a story to get people to kind of look more into what is the reason why I'm designing, only ocean animals or only whales or, only sharks or things like that, then they can kind of start to look in and see a little bit further. And I'm hoping that kind of pushes them into wanting to learn more. And then hopefully that goes into, tumbling down into education, and then eventually getting them to want to advocate and, protect the oceans.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So when did the artsy side of you start? Like, where was the spark for doing that?
So I started drawing since I was a kid too, but I wouldn't say it started off as a passion like it did with marine biology. It was just kind of more of fun scribbles up until about late elementary school. I saw a classmate of mine draw, and of course, being 11 and super ambitious at the time, I was like, well, I want to learn how to draw too. So I asked her to teach me how to draw, and then that's kind of where it started from there. And then later on, when I went through middle school and high school, I got my first digital drawing tablet. And then I made friends through an online art community, which really inspired me to draw more and further develop my skills, because I was in a social group that also drew, and that really pushed me forward into improving my art. So I mentioned this a little bit before. While I attended university, I started up a small online shop with my best friend, just making and selling products like stickers, keychains, and all sorts of those like smaller knickknacks for fandom and anime related things. And eventually we started looking into attending conventions as an independent artist through Artist Alley. And if you're unfamiliar with what Artist Alley is, it's kind of just like an artist flea market where small creators are allowed to bring in their own creations and then sell them to convention attendees. So eventually I started traveling and attending conventions to just sell my stuff there. And then as I traveled more over time and I made more merchandise, my art just gradually improved more because I was, constantly drawing to produce new products.
Yeah, for sure. I have quite a few friends who do similar things, make mugs and various tchotchkes that I met at Comic-Con. And it's a cool and interesting culture. It's very, I would say, very free and fun. At least the people are. And it's always cool to buy something that is difficult to get otherwise sometimes, or to see it, because sometimes you just don't see certain things in a shop. Or you might not know that it exists online, but like you just see it at a convention, you're like, I'm just gonna get that.
Of course.
Yeah, and I've got a few of those tchotchkes lying around.
It's okay. I know. I do too. I have my own share of little trinkets.
Little trinkets. Yeah. So, did you end up finishing your marine biology degree, or did you?
So, I actually didn't, and part of this reason, this is like a big, I guess, to be honest, like an anxiety factor for me, just because, you're not really, I don't know if how good of a reputation you can have, because there's this stigma about not completing. If you don't complete university, you're pretty much like a failure, and you need that higher education in order to access. And while I do agree that education is very important, I think just while I was trying to figure out, what I wanted to do and go from here, I did really enjoy the science part of it. I really did enjoy the trips that I would have to go on for my lab classes in marine bio, all the fun dissections that we got to do, and just the process of learning more. That was always something that was, for me, really interesting, because I loved being engaged in hands-on experience. But kind of as I thought more and more about my future and exactly what I wanted to do, I wasn't there's a lot of really bright minds out there. There's really smart there's really smart scientists who are doing a lot of good work, and I just kind of had this idea I think the reason why people don't take science as seriously as it should be taken is because nobody is there necessarily to, help translate that scientific, jargon into something that's, a lot easier to understand. That's why you have these things that happen in media where, the nerd says something and then, the jock ends up saying, speak English, nerd, that kind of stuff. Is what really gets people mixed up, because, we're talking about really, really important topics here, things that will ultimately change our lives down the line, such as overfishing, climate change, and the fact that predatory species are dying, which is impacting the entire rest of the food chain out there. And a lot of people don't really understand that, or don't really care for it, because, it's hidden behind this giant scientific wall that people tend to look at and go I don't want to deal with that. But through a medium such as art, something that is kind of more popular and kind of not easier to understand, but because it's more popular, right? We see media everywhere. We engage with media in our lives every day, whether that's through television, through art online, through books and things like that. When people ask you what your hobby is and you say, you draw, or, you like to read a book, you like to watch movies and things like that, it's all something that people consider as quote unquote fun. You don't get too many people who answer when they're asked, what's your hobby? I like to go outside and study fish, So that's really the reason why I ended up deciding to drop out of university, because it was getting to a point where like I had to stick with, I felt like I had to stick with one road or the other. You know, it was at a point where like either I need to finish up my degree and, you know, pursue a path that really focuses on education. And then because, you know, if I'm going to be doing that, I don't know if I can keep up with that aspect of art anymore, which had become a really important part of my life. Or, you know, I can go down that art path, which I don't really know where it would take me, but I didn't really want to leave that aspect of marine science behind, because that was something that I really treasured my whole life. So in the end, I just kind of thought like, well, I've had experience before from running this tiny shop, and so I would really like it if I can end up trying to combine the two. And that's where I decided like to drop out of university and really try to focus on that, because I'm sure, as you know, like running a business, just that single aspect of it is really difficult because it's such a huge risk up front. But if I really wanted to make it work, I needed to invest like 100% of my time into it and not, you know, struggle with running this and potentially losing money because I have to prioritize school.
Yeah. No, I think it's actually takes a lot of, you know, courage to quit something like that you've been so invested in for a long time. I'm kind of like the opposite. Like I decided I want to be a marine biologist when I was a kid, and I ended up becoming one, and I'm a postdoc. But I also identified, you know, what you identified in undergrad. I identified it in PhD. Yeah, and I also wanted to get into science communication and you know, education, and that's what this podcast is about. You know, so. I think it takes a lot of courage to because you were so invested and you probably had like money and time involved, but you knew that you wanted to do something else that was also very important. So having that courage to quit, I think, is underrated. And I think degrees and pieces of paper that tell you you're qualified are overrated these days. Like you probably learned a good 2 degrees just doing things, you know, and learning online about business and actually selling, actually marketing. You're actually doing stuff, you know, that kids take 3-4 years to study before they actually do anything. So. I don't think you should feel anxious about it. I think you took action, and you're doing stuff, and it's useful. So yeah, I don't like. I think you know, my generation. You're a bit younger than me probably, but. I think we were sold a lie that degrees are this utmost, like this golden thing in the sky that if you get one, you're set for life. And in some cases that might be true, you know, like a medical doctor or an engineer. If you get one of those, you're probably fine, but they're difficult. I think actually doing the thing that you're really passionate about and you're really interested, I think that's more in this day and age where a lot of the economy is getting gigafied, you know, and there's you don't necessarily have to have one job anymore, or you could switch careers, and you could just stop whatever you're doing just like you did and do something else.
I really appreciate that for sure, because that's always this sort of anxiety factor just in the back of my head. Like, is somebody looking down on me for not completing education, or like, do they think I'm qualified enough to, you know, be talking about marine biology and spreading information because I don't have this big fancy degree on my wall and things like that, you know?
Yeah. I think we should probably not worry too much about that stuff. If somebody, I mean, if you're doing like really wrong stuff, like somebody will correct you, and that's the end of that. Of course. You know, so it's one of those things where it's just mental blocks, I think. People put in front of themselves, and I do it all the time myself. I'm probably my worst critic as well. It's much easier to tell somebody else that you're doing fine than to tell yourself. So
for sure. I 100% agree.
It's one of those things. But like, I would use you as an example of somebody who is doing well in this economy, you know, or in this culture, in this day and age. Like you realize you're going to be happier doing something else, and you just like went for it. Yeah, because I mean, there were points during my PhD where I was so tired and done with academia that I wanted to quit, but I ended up like continuing with it. So like I'm on the other side of that spectrum from you. But sometimes, you know, if you know something is right in your gut and you want to go for it, and so like in the long term, it's probably going to be better for your happiness than you know, just wasting time, because time is short. Life like time is short in life. Yeah. So from your short time as a business person, somebody doing e-commerce, what kind of tips and tricks would you have for somebody else who wants to kind of move away from academia and do something like make a business around environmentalism and science and anything like that?
So I think aside just practicing, really just having the patience and the perseverance is the best advice I can give. I know that sounds like a very simple and unhelpful piece of advice, but everybody starts off from somewhere. You know, nobody just suddenly decides, I'm going to make money off my art, or I'm going to start a business and then suddenly gain 10,000 followers and become a quote unquote successful business owner overnight. You know? I know I mentioned that I only started Umvvelt in January of 2020. And I've been, but outside of that, I've been posting my art online and developing a curated audience that is invested and suited for me for about 8 years. So I started posting my art online more frequently in 2013, and then I started my small shop business with my friend in 2015. And then that whole process of just making money from my art and then, you know, investing the profits that I made into more of my business. So, I couldn't take that profit and immediately pay for bills. You know, I had to immediately invest it and keep growing my business. And just that whole process didn't really become financially stable for me as a job until like really last year. So believe me when I say that a ton of growth doesn't happen overnight. Outside of art, there's a ton of factors that go into the success of trying to monetize your art or just building up a business in general, such as proper understanding of social media algorithm, audience engagement, marketing, all that fancy stuff really plays a huge factor into how well that your business is going to be. Growth comes slowly, and understanding the importance of delayed gratification and the concept that success doesn't come right away, but rather develops gradually as you invest more and more into your work are really the key points to take away from anyone attempting to start a business in general or just make money off their art. You may be successful and you may make back money, or you may make back money or you may lose money. Ultimately, when you look into investing your time and your money into anything, it'll always be a risk. But whether or not you take your losses as a lesson to improve versus a sign of discouragement and failure is really what will determine your level of success in the future.
Yeah, I wholeheartely agree.
Sorry.
Success does not come overnight. I know I've been podcasting for a good 5 years. I've got a very small audience still. But I think one of my problems is just consistency. I haven't had a consistent thing going for a long while.
Right. And like, especially with when you're advertising online, consistency is such a huge player in bumping up your business or your podcast, because the algorithm, like social media algorithms, really favor that consistency. And it partly goes into like, we want you to use our site more, so we're going to bump you up if you talk on our site more frequently. But opposite wise, I had a friend who was recently interviewed by Instagram. And that's a really huge marketing platform for me to work with as well. Like, I have more followers on Instagram than I do on Twitter, and that's because of how marketable Instagram is with how easy it is to connect with people. But my friend did this interview with somebody from Instagram, and they actually punish you if you're not posting consistently. So, especially, if you and I are introverts, for example, we already, we use a ton of our energy to socialize. And when we do, we just kind of want to go back home and take a rest and don't talk to me for the rest of the day kind of thing. That kind of energy goes right back into social media as well. There's just some people who, are really tired because social media moves so fast and there's everybody that's talking about different things at once. It's really draining and it takes a lot of energy to keep up with. So social media is, part of my job. It is what I do. And not all aspects of my job can be fun and exciting, and social media is really draining. Right, exactly. Yeah. But really that consistency is key. That's also another thing that I do want to emphasize with people.
So how are you planning to use social media and anything else to try and grow and scale your business in the future? Do you have any goals you're trying to hit in certain ways? Do you have any plans or are you just writing it out?
So I am pretty much just writing it out because to be honest, I haven't really thought too far into how I want to grow Umvvelt even further than where it's already at. I kind of joked around with my friends like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if my products ended up in an aquarium gift shop? But then as Umvvelt actually got bigger and bigger, I started to consider the idea like, you know what, it'd actually be pretty neat if I got to have my stuff featured in a place that encouraged and nurtured education like aquariums did for me growing up. So I think for now, I'd love to try and find more opportunities to work alongside organizations, just to create products for the purpose of raising awareness and informing people more about the fascinating world that is marine biology. And currently, as somebody who works from home and does a majority of their research at home and online, I'm always looking for more ways to stimulate my brain and learn more through experience. I know that's pretty limited for me because I am somebody who dropped out of university, so I'm not going to get a ton of, boat opportunities because I don't have a degree. That's just kind of how it works for a lot of places, I'm sure, around the world, And I know this coronavirus thing is still hanging around us pretty heavily, but when it's safer to travel, I'd also love to look more into participating in things like citizen science expeditions and sharing my experiences in hopes of encouraging people to get involved in their own community and inspiring them to advocate for protection once they have that sort of experience. Because then having that really having that hands-on experience connects you personally to whatever it is that you're working on. So that's something that I really want to work towards in the future as well.
For sure.
And I know it's not really a business-oriented goal, but I run my business because it's my passion. And so even though I'm not really thinking about things like how to statistically grow my business or statistically grow my earnings or my following, I like to think that at least I do, if I do what I love, then the people who do choose to support me will choose to do so for that very reason. And, not just see me as just a business online.
Yeah. Yeah, I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking of what would be the right term for cultural appropriation, but for science. Is it science appropriation? You don't really care, but you're trying to profit off. I suppose there are a lot of big corporations that have science appropriation, just destroying everything. Yeah. Did we just coin a new term? Where do we submit it? So how do you think the landscape for your business and for your engagement opportunities is going to shape and change in the future? How would you like it to change? What things would you like to happen in terms of social media, in terms of just general consumer behavior, maybe? What would you like to see over the next 5-10 years?
So I think in an ideal world, I would love to see more collaborations between the art and science community in general. I know we as a society kind of view the two as polar opposites, but it would be really great to see things like scientists working alongside with artists to produce larger projects that would invoke more interest from the public into learning more important information that scientists would want them to know or want them to be aware of. And I feel like if they could do that through a unique medium such as art, people would certainly be more interested and more engaged in information that they're trying to put out to the world. I don't see a ton of opportunities like that, especially because I mentioned before, science tends to stick with science and art stick with art. But a collaboration between the two would be a really, really unique opportunity to get people to understand something as complex as science a little easier when it's done through such a familiar and popular medium like art. So that's I can't, that's something that's not really in my control at the moment. But I would really like to eventually start building up my relationships and my connections and, reaching out to scientists and, talking to them and being like, how can I convey this information in a way that the public will be interested in and will want to care about? So that's kind of what I would like to see in the future is more opportunities for, scientists to be open with working with artists and trying to work together in order to put out information that, they can get the general public to care about.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's starting to happen. I think science communication and in all these various different forms, I think it's starting to grow, whether it's podcasting or animation or just video content creation, whatever. So I think there is a space to grow there. I think it will take people like you to try and find a way to bridge the gaps, because science is such a it takes a lot out of you. Like you're going to have to focus on your work if you want to be successful.
Right,
I think that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to cross that barrier between science and art and content creation, because scientists are usually busy making science.
Right, of course.
And some of them aren't really, or might not even know that, getting their voice out there to the public might be important, or they think somebody else is going to do it. So I think as the world becomes more and more connected and interconnected, I think there will be more opportunities. There will be entrepreneurs that will have new ideas and build businesses and try and bridge the gap. Or maybe governments might even intervene and start funding science communication that's the hope. Funding science communication projects and try and build. And I think going into the future now, I think bridging the gaps between all different stakeholders, whether it's scientists, whether it's just a man fishing in a river, whether it's artists, whether it's podcasters, whether it's that nasty company that's dumping nuclear waste somewhere.
Right, of course.
Getting more, conversations between everybody is going to be really important. So yeah, I'm really happy that people like you exist. So we have people in that end to try and help convey the important messages to the public in fun and enticing ways. So I think we've done a nice chat on science communication using art and e-commerce. So why don't you let our lovely audience know where they can find you and your work on the internet?
Sure thing. So I have an Instagram and a Twitter and then a Patreon. And then you can also find me on my shop, which is umvvelt.fish. I'm not sure if I should say the names or anything like that, but I'm assuming
sure.
I can just give you the usernames and you can include them.
I'll have the links in the description.
Right, of course. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so thank you for joining me. It was a fun chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was very fun to talk about these things, and I don't get to do this very often, so this is really a unique experience for me. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Cheers.